Hello, and welcome to the Physical Therapy Owners Club podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Shields. And today I'm excited because we got some new technology coming to the podcast that I'm excited to talk about and how AI influences the physical therapy space now at this kind of new level since AI is a buzzword. And in order to do that, I'm going to have a discussion here with Pedro Teixeira. He is the co-founder and CEO of Prediction Health. Thanks for joining me, Pedro. I really appreciate it.
Happy being here. Should be fun.
Pedro, like I said, I'm excited to bring you guys on because AI being a hot topic, physical therapy, of course, could use some technological advances in terms of some of our pain points, and you're going to share with us what some of those are right now. But before we get into it, tell us a little bit about how you got into the AI and specifically the physical therapy space of all spaces.
Yeah, I'll start with the AI piece. It's kind of a long story, but I'll jump to the cool parts. For the AI thing, so I did comp sci and biochem back in college. I thought that's really cool. But the comp sci thing was kind of not a mistake, but I didn't take my first course until like sophomore year. And I was like, I'll take intro computer science because it seems really cool and I like computers, right? And I took it and I just totally fell in love. And I was just like, I have to do this, right? I'm going to go to med school. I'm going to somehow figure out a way to like grab computer science and like bring it with me. And so I did that. I ended up at Vanderbilt, applied to MD PhD program there, and they have a great biomedical informatics department. It's like, cool, I can do medicine because I thought, healthcare and the human body is just so important. But then the computer science thing was just super cool as well. And AI was starting to kind of have a renaissance around then. And it was like, wow, this is really powerful because computers can do things really quickly, simple things, math things really quickly. But the AI component allows them to do a lot of stuff that you'd sort of care about more in healthcare. Like, does this person seem like they're going to be really sick or not, right? It's not something you can just do easy math. It's usually like a really complicated pattern match problem. And so went to Vanderbilt, met my co-founder there, Rabia Treya, and we were processing all this data. And it was just so awesome to be able to teach the computer to find patterns of people like with hypertension, without, they're going to be really sick. They're not going to be really sick.
Medical records? Or are you looking at studies across different platforms? Where's the data coming from?
Great question. So Vanderbilt was really cool to go to because they had their own EHR, which they had had for a long time. And so they had millions of records, and they had text data, they had lab report description and, PT reports, everything was in there. And the problem was, though, that a lot of it's just kind of written out like in text. And if you have a discrete data like numbers, like, this person has 5 problems, this person has this ICD-10 code, that's usually what people are sort of more used to processing. But that means that the things that then are typed in, they're really important, right? Like maybe you're saying like, hey, I'm kind of worried about Mrs. Jones.
Yes, it's actually the subjective parts and some of the interpretation that's not in the impression, that kind of stuff you're talking about. Okay, yeah.
Exactly, right? So that's where like the whole AI thing really became like this shining like tool that I could use and apply, is because that type of problem where things that are important are written in text by people, AI is a really good thing to pull that back out and to kind of organize and structure it. And so getting the opportunity to run something where you could run it on millions and millions of charts and get answers out from that text that you're never going to sit there and read, 10 million charts. That just felt like a superpower to me. And I was just totally hooked,
Was there a certain aha moment like this? Like, did you get a result at some point? You're asking a certain question or trying to solve a certain problem and said, wow, that's super powerful. Was there any moment like that?
There's 2, like one super early, and it was funny. It was one of the first assignments I did. It was like cracking passwords, and you could just basically ask it to do the simplest silly thing, which is try every single password of like 1 and 2 characters and 3 characters. And I had it print to screen. So it would print every single time it tried one. And the thing just goes shooting across my screen, just going so fast. And I remember just like, whoa, right? Because it was doing like hundreds of thousands of things per second. And it just like, and then I kind of had another similar moment when I was doing the PhD work, because I would go and I'd be like, oh, cool, I have these 2 million patients, like, let's figure out who has hypertension. And we'd write the algorithm and we'd do all this data processing, and then you'd hit go, and it would just like churn through, millions of patients, if we wanted to. Be like, cool, here's the ones that most certainly have it. Here's the ones that might, here's the ones that don't seem like they have it. And I just like, it's like I'm Superman, but for, reading electronic health records.
Yeah. And so you continue to go down that path with the AI.
Yeah. So we just, so my co-founder and I were both like, when you're doing that, part of the reason you do AI is because AI is very robust. If you train it right, it's really robust.
Right.
And, sometimes people are doing abbreviations. Sometimes an electronic health record is organized in kind of a messy way, like they have the data in there, but, it gets tossed in the wrong field or what have you, right? And so it would be very helpful if you could help, keep patients healthier and help organizations just do a better job, be more efficient in their care. One of the cool things about using AI methods is because they're robust. If you train them well, they'll be robust. And people don't always put the right thing in the right field, and they don't talk about it the same way, and they don't use the same acronyms. And sometimes, they just make up acronyms, right? And the AI made to pattern match the same way that, like, if you're looking at a picture of a dog, it could be a puppy, it could be an older dog. The dog could be hidden, behind a tree, and you can kind of pick it out, right? That's one of the powers for AI. And so my co-founder and I were just like, we've got to apply this. This is so powerful. This is so useful. If we could help it improve care for patients and help organizations be more efficient, that would be huge. And so we knew it was kind of ridiculous and risky, but we're like, we're going to go start a startup and we're going to try to be helpful with AI and clean up this EHR data and try to provide people with useful insights using this AI technology that seems like it's really well suited to take all the stuff hidden in the notes and make it really easy to digest and take action on.
Yeah. What year was this?
That was the very beginning of 2017.
Oh, you've been at this for a while.
Yeah.
We're talking about AI now, like it's brand new, but you've been dealing with it for a long time.
We've been cracking it for a while, and it's been really cool to see as the models have gotten bigger, as people have refined the techniques, that you've been able to just do new and better and cooler things. And it feels like this gigantic wave is like something really picking up. And like we're still surfing on this thing that we thought was going to be like a cool wave, but now it's like this ridiculous thing. And it's been really exciting and very interesting.
How did you get into the physical therapy space of all places?
Yeah. So we started off figuring we'd do documentation, right? Like, okay, the notes are the thing that we think have useful data in them.
Right.
So let's start off with a thing that people don't really like to write that, we'll see if we can be useful there, right? And so we did initially have kind of a documentation assistance product where we listen into the conversation and then we would try to get it summarized. And the bar for quality on that is like really, really, really high, which is appropriate, as you would totally expect. And so we had humans in the loop to kind of like review the data and carefully look over that. And we had a couple specialties. We started in family medicine, we added urology, we got to physical therapy. And when we were going through with the site, I thought that was really interesting as an idea. They tell us, well, okay, so yeah, the notes, and they also have to be compliant. They have to be compliant. And we're like, that's interesting. Tell me more. And, of course, you all have to hit all these little check boxes and things and this many goals and written this way.
Right.
And that's in other specialties. And I remember sitting there in actually Kelly Brown's office, who's actually joined us since. She's a PT and she's really awesome. And I was like, hey, this actually seems like a really good problem for our models because they're good at reading text and finding and categorizing things in useful ways. So this sounds like a really good opportunity for us. We'll learn from the documentation. We'll kind of pursue it. And it has just really ended up being a really great specialty that we've decided to just super focus on because you all have the compliance problem. You have a lot of like optimization. You have the CPT coding, selection problem, like that you don't want to be inappropriate. You want to make sure that it's accurate, but you also don't want to undercode.
Right.
And there's just a bunch of really good problems for the types of models that we've been building. And PT has been such a welcoming specialty that it's just great. Like the vibe is really awesome. People are really positive and just really appreciative that someone has, I guess, we're trying to be helpful, and it seems like that's really, really appreciated and it's been very welcoming. So we've been, let's go and let's just dive down and help people in PT. And maybe someday we can get to the point where we can extract value and information for lots of other specialties too. But it just fits so PT that if you're going to expand somewhere, that it's been a great spot. So,
those who are listening, if you haven't gathered so far, Prediction Health's focus, and correct me if I'm off on this at all, Pedro, but your focus is on reviewing documentation for compliance and optimizing the CPT's build, essentially, right? And then also taking it a step further to not just assess for compliance, but then show the documenter where they are falling short on their compliance and train them on what could be said or done differently to improve not only their documentation according to compliance benchmarks or expectations, but also optimize their billing.
Yeah.
Am I saying it right?
Yeah, that's really good, right? Like I kind of almost think of it like diving. Like if you're like diving up and down, like the 30,000 foot view, and then go into like the 5 foot view, right?
Yes.
We can have the models read every single sentence of every single note, and we can scale these clusters up so they can process millions and millions of notes, right?
Right.
And then you're not going to go read through that. We don't want you to read through every single one of those things. We want to make it really easy for you to get the overview of from a compliance or from a CPT or whatever perspective. Hey, how are we doing? Oh, there might be a problem here, and then make it really easy to dive down and be like, okay, cool. Like, why is this note not compliant? Oh, the goals. Your goals aren't really measurable, right? So, hey, cool. Tell Joe, hey, you're doing great. This is the one spot where you could maybe improve. Or maybe you're wasting time writing stuff too, right? That's another thing that we've seen is some people come out of school, especially, and maybe they document way too much. And so we all help you figure out like, hey, like this is way over documented. You could save, 5 minutes here per note or something, because you only really work so much to be compliant and accurate. You don't need, quite as much, let's say, and then you can save some time. So again, we're just trying to be helpful.
This is where I'm kind of getting shaky, excited, because if you're listening and you're a PT owner and you care about compliance, you do not want to do chart auditing. It's like you have to sit there and read every word and then make your notes and be like the elementary school grade teacher with the red pen saying, don't do this, this could be better. And then at times it could be subjectively interpreted like, well, I could have done it. Why isn't this right? No, what you're saying is your software program, and with the usage of AI, can do the chart audits for you. Am I saying that right? And tell you where your compliance is off and how you can bill better. And that in and of itself, PT owners should be doing it. The percentage of them that actually are doing it is relatively small. And the percentage of them that are actually doing it and doing it correctly is even smaller. So what you're bringing to the table is something that needs to be done, is required to be done if you're a Medicare provider, and hopefully you are getting it done. But if you aren't getting it done, I'm sure you're in the majority. And now you're saying here's something that you can offer that just takes care of that for you.
Yeah.
Like my brain's exploding, and I'm really excited for the owners that are out there that are listening.
Good. Yeah. Again, we're trying to be helpful in it. It's a really fortunate circumstance that the models are just really good at this type of thing. And like I would be terrible at this if I had to go sit down and like review like 6, episodes of care per year per person and remember,
right,
like, did you do a signs and symptom? Did you do enough comorbidity? Are the goals measurable in every single one of them? Like all this stuff you have to remember at the same time. The computers are really good at remembering little facts and checklisty things as long as they can read the sentences. And with AI, you can now read the sentences. So then you can take that part away, and then it's the same model run on every single sentence. So I feel like it's fair. It's really consistent. Not going to be like, I really like Joe, but I don't like Sam. So like I'm going to grump.
You're fully objective.
Yeah, exactly.
And just for peace of mind, you're able to then teach the program the compliance expectations that are out there. Like Medicare expects these things. And so I guess you're able to teach it and program that accordingly so that if a compliance expectation changes or added, it's not hard to upgrade.
So one of the things that we go through with folks is we have, if we're looking for like goals, right? Like there's actually like a thing in the policy somewhere that describes what you have. So we kind of have like mapping to links so that we show people like, hey, look, we look for these things, here's kind of like how we weight stuff. So some things are not as important as others, right? And then we can sort of reference you back. And Medicare is usually kind of the standard because that's the most common one as like the default. Say like, we're looking at this and like it come from over here. And so we try to be really transparent with things. And like the ML thing is going to be like super perfect all the time, but you can like flag stuff. You can say, hey, I don't know about this, or I don't know if I agree. And we'll, of course, either like explain things, or we can always kind of like check them all and be like, hey, like, why exactly are you doing this, right? And we retrain it, like we're always retraining models and doing new things. And then if there is a change, right, to your point, I don't have to now like communicate out to a bunch of different compliance officers and like every single therapist and remind them all the time. We just retrain the one model, and then we can run full pass on whatever millions of things, we want to.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing because I'm understanding. I don't have to learn all the compliance metrics. I don't have to study and know every single bit of required documentation that has to be in every patient note. I can now leave it to a model that has it all installed. Again, a huge time saver in documentation, and it keeps us compliant. And it's really interesting because I did a quick webinar with Andrew in your company, and he shared with me how it will also share with you how you might want to utilize your documentation to bill a different CPT code.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I think it's huge and valuable, in that if you were like most PTs back in the day, there was a lot of therapeutic exercise and there was a lot of manual therapy build,
Mm-hmm.
three of those and one of the other. And, that's very common, where honestly, according to the exercises that you're doing, maybe a better code is therapeutic activity. Maybe a better code is neuromuscular reeducation. And oh, by the way, those do reimburse better. Or maybe you could change your documentation a little bit because you're doing that exercise to justify those codes. You just need to add this blurb. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it's able to do that for you as well, train you.
Yeah, and that's a brand new model that I've actually spent a lot of time working on and reviewing data. And I tell folks that it's a Goldilocks problem. If you go really conservatively and you do 2 units of Therax, that's all you put. If you did a bunch more than that, then you're kind of being inefficient with like the resources that you put in. Like you did work that you're not going to get paid for. But
yeah, and can I add to that? That can be a little bit of a red flag there. If every visit in a patient's note is 2 and 1, 3 and 1, 2X Therax, 3 Therax, and 1 manual therapy all the time, then that can be a flag from what I've heard, because you're not making any changes, or there's not a lot of skilled thought in that. So it may be one to consider that. So you do have a point there.
Yeah, we actually do check for like copy forward. Like if the pattern is the exact same for too long, that actually factors into the compliance score, because then you're not necessarily progressing the care as much, right? You can actually like super dinged, I think, if you do over 3 or 4 visits in a row of exactly the same sort of thing and same exact text, is a red flag. You can get in trouble. So that's huge, right? So if you're underdoing it, or if it's always the same, you're not progressing, that's a problem. But then on the other side, if you overdo it, right? Or if you're saying it's their act, but you didn't really do something that merits that code, then that's now a compliance. So you kind of just want to be really accurate,
right?
But the best way to determine if it's accurate, at least that we've been able to figure out, is that these models could just read what you're saying, what activities you did, how you're justifying it, and then it'll then predict, like what's the code that kind of makes sense based on what we've done and reviewed. And then you can see, right, do you have any sort of risk where you've maybe overdone it, which is bad, or do you have some, inefficiency because you've underdone, what you've actually put the time and effort in to do. So that's been really cool to do, and folks have been kind of excited about that, which I understand.
Oh, for sure. Oh, it's huge. It's huge because, and I'm imagining, not knowing the details, with a program like yours, it seamlessly integrates into most EMRs at this point. Am I wrong?
So we have, like the overall like thing for that product is like this dashboard tool, and we connect into WebPT, the prompt, clinician, and then we'll work with some other folks to add in, and we work towards
MW therapy as well.
Yeah. We just started working there too, and there's some more folks that we're going to be announcing, which is exciting. And for the WebPT, it's SOAP 1 and SOAP 2, right? So then you just tell us, what EHR you have, and we get login, and then we handle the rest. We just kind of pull all it in, we process it, and then you get dashboards that will highlight, hey, like here's all your therapists, and here's clinic, X, Y, and Z, and get you all the metrics in that system.
And so, just to ask a little bit in the weeds here, does each provider then have access to their own AI compliance metrics, or is that something that just comes to the owner?
What we've seen so far is the most common is like owners for sure, and like leadership, team folk, absolutely. Compliance officers will get access. And then there's some variability for like the next sets of things. For some groups, they have a bunch of clinic directors, and so they have then their clinic directors also get access so that they can go in and manage their clinics with all that numerical data. And then the next thing that we said some people do send or have individually is the snapshot. So
Okay.
they don't necessarily want to go through the entire dashboard, but it would be really relevant for them to know, like, well, how am I doing? And so summarize it all down into a snapshot that shows things like the compliance score, what the top 3 things are to work on, and what the top 3 are that you're really good at, and then some things around like charge capture, diversity, and other operational metrics on like one little snapshot that then the clinic directors actually will use as like a nice quantitative, tracking metric over time that they can just kind of review with the therapist that they're overseeing.
And what I love what you've done as well is that you've given like grades, percentage grades. So how are you doing with this compliance metric? And are you 80% or are you 5%? Or so you can really see not only where not that you're just maybe off a little bit, but how far you're off with compliance on a and you can see, they might be compliant in, I don't know, 10 out of the 16 metrics. I don't know how many there are, but what are those 6 that they need work on? And you can just specifically focus on those things and increasing those grades.
We of course roll it up because again, like that 30,000 foot view back down to like the 5 foot view, we want it really easy to. And so we'll do a full summary for just like the grade for the person for like each month so they can kind of see how they're progressing. But then behind the scenes, there's like, I think a total of 60 current labels just for the compliance score that are behind it. And then those break into sort of like these, I think it's actually about 16 like sub items across initials and, dailies, discharge, et cetera, different. Exactly. And so we can tell you, hey, like it's your initials and it's the, the functional exam, part is an issue, because otherwise it'd be really hard to improve over time if you're like, okay, you told me it's bad, but like why? So we want to be able to go straight down and say like, it's just like this section and then that one, and otherwise you're great.
This is a really specific question. I'm wondering if you can help. Could be commonly a question for providers. And that is, could you be able through the documentation to differentiate if it's appropriate to bill for a reevaluation, or if the documentation that was used to justify a reevaluation was compliant or not? Can you get that specific?
So the way we look at the predictions and labels does take into account what kind of note it is. So like you just expect different things and with different weightings for an initial versus like a daily. So the scoring tool does actually like look into that. And I believe we also have some things that you can filter on a bunch of different stuff. But then if you want to really hone in on, I don't know, like did I miss a re-eval or something like that?
Yeah.
Or did an initial done and like, they didn't like bill or like checking the code, like a lot of sort of those things that you would do that there's a lot of rules for. We use some like filters and ways to kind of like look at that, because, it comes up as a problem, right? Like you don't want to go so many visits before you do a re-eval, for example.
Right. Exactly. I think there's always, you're trying to play that game. You want to do, you do enough work to justify a re-eval, but then the insurance company might not accept it around, and you feel like you're justified, and you want to make sure your documentation supports it. And so it's nice to have that guidance and support, especially from a non-person, to not have to bug somebody about it, right? Yet what I also liked about in the demo that he shared with me is that you can use the AI bot to ask for examples of how certain phrasing could be better, right? So again, you don't have to go to your clinic director. You can just, the providers themselves and even the clinic directors, owners could go to it and say, how could this be worded better and client, right? So it can do some of that training and can interact with the provider.
Yeah. So that's a really fun like new feature too. We've kind of been thinking almost like, do we want to have like a chat GPT, but for like PT?
Right.
GPT, PT.
Yeah.
Which anyway, but we have really great folks like Kelly, she's a PT, she's been working with us, and we're thinking like, we basically want to make like a Robo Kelly, right? That you could ask questions, so that you can interpret things better and ask like, hey, like who's doing great, who's doing worse, how do I phrase this better, and build that into them so you can kind of just get it whenever you want through that interface. But then there's some cool stuff I think in the future that is related sort of like future steps is you want to make it closer. You want to bring that, like the space between like the evaluation and the documentation. You want to get to the point where it's like real time, like really close, like helping you actively write, you know? And the technology is, like this is the first couple steps, towards getting there.
Well, speak to that a little bit. That's a great segue. Where do you see this technology going, specifically in the physical therapy space?
Yeah. So telling somebody like, hey, you did great here, and then here's some spots to improve is helpful, because otherwise it's, again, like that black box. But, long term, well, why don't you just like help you write it really well the first time is basically the thing that we want to solve for. And so working to kind of start building towards a real time and integrating so that, I know what you wrote before. I know like kind of how things have gone. Can you just give me like a focused set of things that you've changed and updated, and then now I can help you and at least give you suggestions for like, here's some compliant ways that you could do, the phrasing.
Predictive text.
Yeah, exactly. And like that AI bot, like behind the scenes, like the technology to kind of do that, very much, overlaps with the kind of thing that you would want to do. Predictive text, like to help me finish my note faster. And now, you can actively tell me as I'm picking stuff like, okay, yeah, it's compliant. We just checked it, like a spell checker, like a compliant spell checker built in, but also the typing ahead for you, because when the, like if you're on like email, and Gmail now has that thing with the predictive text, if it just writes it for you, it doesn't make a lot of spelling errors, right? And
exactly, right. And do you see a situation in the future, and I'm sure it will be, decades down the road, but where the guidelines for billing certain codes for certain insurance codes might also help you document appropriately? So not every note and every charge is Medicare related. So say you pick an insurance, Cigna, and they don't allow certain codes, but they do allow the other codes. And then there's multiple pay procedure pay reduction, MPRs, that might come into play if you're billing accordingly. Don't bill this code more than one unit. Do you see some of that coming into play in the near future?
Yeah, I think that's a really exciting opportunity, because if I'm seeing patients, I can't possibly remember different rules for each person based on what insurance they have and what condition they have. Like that's not, at least to expect.
Yeah, and it sucks because honestly, we're getting screwed because we have to remember those things. For each insurance company has different ways, and if I don't bill it right, then I'm going to be the guy that loses the money on that care.
Yeah, it doesn't seem maybe to be an accident that they make it complicated, right?
Right.
But computers, right, are incredibly good at remembering and doing all these little lookup things. So I think that's definitely going to be something, right? Like default now is Medicare because it's so common. But there's obvious cases we're already seeing in the data where like, oh, like they only did this many codes or this unit or whatever because there's a cap for this payer or that for the other thing. So we definitely make that really easy for people and expand for customization payer or like whatever else ends up being, relevant. There's opportunities, I think, there.
There are some really amazing things that are happening now, and we can foresee, just as you said, what can happen in the future. Any cons that you've come across over the past few years, or things that you've had to watch out for?
The AI tool is super powerful, and these types of tools are really, really powerful. But then what you do get is the challenges that come along with scale. So if you get it to predict some word wrong for some reason, and if it's running across millions and millions of notes, right, you have to keep that in mind. So you have to like have monitoring in place. So because of how many things it can process, you also have to just make sure, because if it does make a mistake 0.1% of the time, if you're doing millions of charts, that adds up really fast.
A million mistakes.
Yeah, right. Or like people actually have mentioned a similar thing for like ChatGPT, right? That this is great when it works well, but like if it hallucinates or it does something off, like, and if millions and millions of people are using it, then it's hallucinating and giving them like, George Washington was not born in whatever random country, like goofs up, So you have to sort of like watch that scale side. So we try to be very about doing spot checks. We have compliance folks do manual checks against the chart, and we sort of see how closely they agree, and then try to do more and more over time to like include monitoring, and so that if it suddenly starts behaving, and getting some things differently, we can kind of compare historically to make sure the results. And then of course always like try to make it visible. Like, hey, look, we predicted this, and like here's what it is. So you can spot check it and see if you agree, if it makes sense to you or not. And if you don't, like, please, just give it a little, it's got a little thumbs down or thumbs up sign, So you can be like, oh, like it was good. This one, is kind of odd. And then we track every single one of those because again, like you don't want it to make you don't want it to make mistakes, but like nothing's perfect. So you want to be transparent and track that so that you can keep improving over time.
Yeah. And how do you've done this a number of times with a number of clinics across the country already? Can I ask how many you're working with at this point in 2023?
Yeah, well, we've added a lot of folks recently.
That's what I hear. You guys have really ramped up in the last few months.
When I think it was by like organizations, like logos, and it's like we're well over 50, 60, 70 now. But like a lot of those have been added over the course of this year, and it's like organizations. I don't remember offhand clinics.
That could be, multiplied by that by a certain number as to the.
And yeah, some hundreds of hundreds and hundreds of therapists. Others, even down to like smaller groups, that don't have a compliance officer. So it's a very wide variability on that too.
Well, that was another question. Is it something that you would recommend for even the smaller practice that might have one or two providers as well as someone with 100 providers in their company? Is there some kind of minimum level that at which it works best?
What we've seen is that people get like very different things based on their size. Like,
okay,
if you're really small, then like you're not going to afford a compliance officer. Like, if you're that small, and it's a couple PTs, like you probably are the quote unquote compliance officer, right?
You are it, yeah.
And so in that case, if you're worried about compliance, or if you're like just worried about like, hey, like, are we being really efficient with like how we code or how we do these other things?
Right.
Then it's a good alternative that would be more cost effective than having like hire a compliance officer for some portion of their time, or like pay some like billing opposition person to like go through. So that's that side. And then metrics too are like helpful for them. But then if you're on the other side, if you're like a really big organization, you might have like some KPIs and some dashboards already for a lot of the stuff. But then what you probably don't have, right, is the AI models to read through the actual text for either the CPT code appropriateness, predictions, or the compliance predictions, in which case, this now gives your team, you have resources to do metrics that you want to optimize, right? It gives them new tools that they otherwise wouldn't have, so that now you can take that team, have them focus on things like, some compliance hotspots or some CPT coding misunderstandings that otherwise could kind of fly on the radar because it's hidden in the, whatever million notes your organization does per year.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's what I love about what where you've progressed to at this point is because compliance in and of itself is an expense. It's not a revenue generator, right? Whereas the little that you can add, and maybe it's a lot, but what you can add in terms of helping you build better, where you might be missing those, and adding or recommending different codes based on the documentation and vice versa. That's where it can be a return on investment.
Yeah,
it's not just a sunken cost.
Exactly. What we were hoping is basically with the new CPT billing efficiency related modules to make it like a positive ROI, like that you basically lines for free is the one provide, and the ROI on those new features that we're launching, it's different for different groups. Some people get like a lot, but like on average, I believe we're in somewhere of the range of like a 4x to like 3 to 5x at least ROI for people on average. So that like you are basically kind of getting compliance for free, assuming that, you just, look at the results for the billing efficiency piece or the coding efficiency piece and just kind of, rates, some small percent of the learning. Yeah. You can get a reasonable return.
That's awesome. And I know you're much more on the technical side of things. Have you recognized where implementation, is it difficult? Is it time? Does it take a lot of time? Is it heavy into that? What's involved with implementation?
For the customer, you just like, if you're on one of those EHRs already, then you just say like, hey, I want to use it, sign, say, cool, we want to use it. The BAA, of course, because you have to be HIPAA compliant and everything.
Right.
And then we just handle the rest. We got all these converters and different kinds of robots that pull the data out. We run it through all the ML models, and then you just get your dashboards, and can usually do it, under 2 weeks for sure, for like super late or something, but some people it's like a day and we can turn it around.
Well, the one friend of mine that's actually using your technology, and I think he has 4 or 5 clinics at this time, signed up. He turned things over to you guys. How worried about you? So you have access to the data, And he said he didn't hear anything back, but 3 or 4 days later, here's your report. Here's all the things that you can work on, that just showed up in his email. And he was completely surprised that it happened that quickly. And it wasn't a painstaking process like it is to implement a new EMR or something like that, right? It was quick and easy. Sifted through all the data and gave him a nice cool report after a few days.
Oh, that's really good to hear. We really try to make things easy for you. Like, you guys have so much to do already. No, we've heard some like really, intense stories. And I've even gone to a lot of events and conferences where people are like, I got to hire, I got to find people, I got to cover shifts, I'm seeing patients, and I got to work with clients and like reviewing things and the billing and then the denials. And like, it's just like, oh man, we don't need to give you guys any more. Let's make this super easy as possible. Because like, I get it, you're in clinic and it's already crazy enough keeping up with your patients. Once you own a practice or have to, on top of some other stuff, it just gets nuts.
Yeah. So. Well, the reason why you provide so much value in this situation was that documentation is the largest, I don't think it's going out on much of a limb, but is the largest pain point in most clinics. Just simply the documentation involved and maintaining compliance and the billing associated with it. That it's a huge headache for any provider. Whether you're, especially if you're the provider and not the owner. The owner has other things that they're worried about, but if you're a provider, like, you just want to treat patients, and the documentation is such a downer. And so that's the beauty and that's the value that your technology brings to this.
No, it's something. I remember, like, that was the worst part. Like, okay, I finish a shift, I didn't end up practicing, but finish a shift, like, I got to write like these notes still, and like, I know what I did. It's gone. They're good. We discharged them, and I still have to write the story of the stuff that's already done. Like, this not how I want to spend, 2 a.m.
Yeah. And this is exactly why I was excited to have you on today. You guys, you're doing some awesome work. So I was really excited to highlight that today. So if people wanted to learn more about Prediction Health, how do they get in touch with you guys?
So the website is just predictionhealth.com. And if you want to send us an email or ask a question, you can always email sales@predictionhealth.com. And we also have a presence on LinkedIn, if folks wanted to search there as well, that's preferred. And just Prediction Health, one word. And we can those and things, and there's some videos on there for folks. But again, and then you can always message me too, Pedro@predictionhealth.com. Love being helpful.
Yeah, because I know on your page, on your website, you can sign up for a demo. And I think I recommend everyone listening to do that at least to see if that should work for you. It'd be a benefit to you. Anything else you want to share in terms of AI in the physical therapy space and what Prediction Health is doing? Anything we didn't cover that comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, AI has been super, super cool, classically, but also like the latest stuff. And so for anybody that's like more on the tech side, if they're on the fence or something, like, yeah, absolutely. I think healthcare and taking advantage of tools like this that are getting available and becoming easier to use is, I think, going to be huge for people that have an easier time, completing their work or looking up information. If it seems remotely relevant to us and you have feedback, we always love getting feedback from folks so we can keep improving. We try to launch things pretty consistently and quickly. And then for folks more on the clinical side, that I think there's a lot of really good opportunities for technology to help, especially AI, because it's just getting so powerful and easier to use. And so I really encourage folks to, if you're doing this, the same thing for, again, you're like, oh man, I hate doing X, it's a good opportunity to maybe like sort of take a step back and like, what am I doing in my workflow that's making things really difficult? And are there any tools that seem like they could help? Because there's already, I think, a lot of providers and owners that I've seen do cool things with like ChatGPT, right? Like, help me write an announcement to local folks to say to go PT practice or something, right? Or, explain these following 5 exercises. I've seen a lot of cool stuff. So just what we're technical or not as technical, the tools are getting so easy to use that, either let us know. We'd love to find good use cases that people are to be excited about, or try stuff out yourself, because you can definitely use these new technologies to make your day-to-day easier.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, again, thank you for coming on, Pedro. I really appreciate the time that you took with us.
Yeah. No, I had a blast. It was really great to meet you and then great to have this chat.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.